Hey everybody, what's up? It's Booksy. Today is Tuesday, October 17th. This could be an update for AMC, a little bit of SPY thrown in there for you as well. So we got the pullback that I've been talking about all last week. Ultimately, what this pullback represents is a pullback to the backup, as I would call it. We call it like the backup creek. This area is where you come back to when you're kind of running out of steam and liquidity. And it's a desire to come back and get to this low liquidity that we left behind. We knew it was going to set up along the top here. I think it could go as low as maybe the 8 somethings, maybe down to here even 860s perhaps. I don't know if it's going to get much lower than that. It's not impossible. Do I think it's probable? I mean, it's just a lot of questions in that. I think we talked about it a lot in the videos last week. I don't want to recap the same things that I already talked about. But, this is basically like a 50-50 move over the creek. And that was kind of part of my reasoning, was that it was a really clean 50% retrace back down to the top. We hit it almost perfectly at 905 or something like that, and then bounced. Right now I'm just kind of watching this bottom form out. I'm not positive that this is going to be a full-on S-curve that drops really low. It could technically come really far down back to the 820s because there is support down here that hasn't been severely checked. That's pretty low. Right here you can see the liquidity shelf. Is it possible? Yeah. Is it probable? Not as probable to me. I think that we're going to see a shallow S-curve where this basically forms out and creates whatever new low it's going to make and or double bottom. Could it be an LPS? Sure. It could be something where you don't come down as low. You make a higher low and then you push up. It doesn't really matter. We're kind of already in the range that we need to be in. The reasoning for this is pretty straightforward, right? You push out, you have a buy-in, it's a breakout. We didn't actually test when we left. We didn't test the top. This doesn't really count. In most cases, it's too light. On the bigger picture, we were overbought. Severely overbought for 4 days going up on this final push here. This is a parabolic move at the end of a parabolic move. It just looked like it was going to have that pullback. It was divergent on the RSI. We hadn't come back down to check the top. There were so many things that were pointing to a correction, which is why I stuck to my guns last week, even though, we were off by a little bit. I did call the 1115. But it just wasn't my most likely target, at least at the time. I thought that would stop at 1080. It went beyond that, and then it distributed. We did find support above this outer creek here, the higher creek, as I called it. And you can see here that white line coming down. So at this point, we're looking at a new one, which is kind of this outer one here, which is this orange guy. And we'll have to kind of keep that in consideration because we created a new anterior point. We pushed out farther. Right, so that's going to be a secondary kind of creek that we're going to deal with when we come back out. It could be a place where we stop and reaccumulate before we push up again. But what we're going to watch for today and what I'm going to watch for this week is just this general M-cross shapes. So on the big picture, this is what I had drawn, and this is what you want to see. Is basically you want to see whatever low you're going to make. You want to see it push up and react and basically push resistance. Then you want to see it come back down, create a higher low, and then basically go into your SOS stage, okay? Pretty straightforward corrective move for AMC. Has it already happened? Is that possible? It's possible, but I don't think it's super likely. I think we're still seeing the early stages of a correction because, again, what's the whole point of this? It's not just to come back down and check it just because. It's really to explore liquidity, and you can see there's not that much that's been traded, especially compared to previous regions. It's better for us to have a weak plus long bottom here to really reestablish that this is going to be a floor and support. I think that this trend that we traded off of for quite a while is pretty important as well. I think we traded a lot along this marker. I think this will be the one that we end up finding support on. There is another one here. I don't want to make it sound like it's only one thing. There's another one here that's a bit higher. You can see there's some touch points along it. That's kind of the one that we rested on, yesterday. We hit there early and then came back down. I don't know if that's going to hold. If that holds, maybe it could be a much higher buy-in, more of a rising accumulation here. My anticipation in general is that we're going to make another lower low here. I think it could be down into the 860s at the lowest. I said that a minute ago. I do think that it's possible later on in the week you could get an even deeper spring. I know max pain is around 850s. I think it's possible that we get down there very end of the week in more of a spring-like action, sort of a terminal action. But overall, what we want to see is that we've created a new creek yesterday, right? So yesterday's price action was kind of a mixed bag. We had a nice early creek cross, and then it took forever, and it finally pushed out above the support that was on, or excuse me, the resistance that was on 940, but it very quickly then distributed end of day. So we got a bit of a mixed bag, right? As a result, I'm not confident that this is going to come back up. Now, there is a gap, so we'll see. Maybe the gap fills and it's strong and it pushes above. But at this point, we've kind of moved past that, right? We're now at this like outer creek part. So what we need to see is we need to see it find support wherever it is, whether it's a double bottom here around 905, whether it comes a little lower. It doesn't really matter to me personally. I think it just needs to find support. Could it be higher? Sure. But then I want to see it push up and push resistance. And specifically, that will be now coming above 950. So once it comes above 950, my expectation, again, this is like a giant M cross, right? My expectation on this wave is that you would then push up higher, create a new high, could even come above 980 by that point. We'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath for that. If it did come above 980, it could just slide down really hard, you know. So you got to watch that kind of stuff. It's possible, you know, that we see this breach really high and then drop down. But doesn't really matter. Point is, it comes above like 950 area. Then it comes back down. It probably looks a little bit distributive, a little bit flat, drops down end of week, and that's where we end the week. That's my expectation. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's what I'm looking for. That would accomplish a lot of things. That would accomplish us jumping over this new outside creek right here. I'm using the word anterior because it just works better with just outermost. You know what I mean? It's on the outermost part instead of, you know, interior, exterior, anterior, superior, right? These are different words that we can use. But this idea of it being the outermost creek now, I think is important. So I want a shallow S-curve. I want to see it bounce out. I want to see it kind of come back down and then get back down to lows end of week and find support at least, if nothing else, on this trend right here. It could be that steeper trend I talked about, but at least right here, okay? If that happens and then you start seeing it break out again, so what I've drawn here is like hypothetical creeks. I don't know if it's going to be way faster than this or if a little bit slower. What I've drawn here is like hypothetical creeks, okay? And what we want to see is after it pushes up, it jumps over the creek, retests it, then jumps over the next creek, right? The new outer creek, and then retest that. And as soon as that happens, you get this kind of succinct like M cross on the big picture, and on the small picture, it's checking those creeks. As soon as it makes that high or low, that's a good buy-in opportunity. And you can wait for the SOS, which is the next part, which is you come up and then you make that SOS motion along the top, which to me I think will be pretty clearly like 980. But that's where you're going to sort of be, that's where it's going to be kind of over, right? So I'll have more details as we go along this week as this forms out. Right now, it's total guesswork because there's not really enough data here, in my opinion, to kind of make a really strong case. This might be the best case right here, is that we get kind of this 47 degree, this has happened before, where we get like this final setup right here creates some downward angles that are used. This was something that happened to us back in August of 2022. And that could end up being where that breakout ends up being in the end. So no matter what happens, that's kind of what we want to see going forward. And it could be very fast, could be a little bit slower than that, but that's sort of what I'm looking for. So some kind of a bottom formation here, whether this is a spring in the end or an LPS. I want to see it eventually gain support again on this trend, coming from the bottom all the way through the place that we found support on Friday the 6th. Those are the 2 points that I'm using. And then I want to see that breakout, of this downward angle. So it could come up pretty high before it comes back down again. So just keep that in mind. It could come down before it comes up. This isn't like a one-trick pony, right? There's a lot of different ways that AMC has created bottoms. What's consistent is that jump and then the secondary jump, right? It's the double shape, which a lot of people call a W. I call it an M because it doesn't always break back up, right? So again, I'm not going to get into too much detail. I already kind of talked about it briefly about why you would come back down, but I talked about that all last week. I was convinced it was going to happen. It did happen. It happened after kind of a fake out, breakout to the top. Pretty normal stuff for AMC. Hopefully you guys were hedged. I was hedged. I felt pretty good about the hedge because I knew there was a strong possibility to come back down. I know a lot of people get stuck in calls on this kind of stuff. I was trying to help people avoid that. That's why I was really adamant that this was possible. And ultimately, if you played your cards right, you saw it was possible, you should have been out, hopefully. I say should have, but that's kind of a wishy-washy term. You could have been out if it broke down, and you got to remember that this isn't like gambling, right? There's no such thing as a hot hand. A lot of people, when they're out on the, casino floor, which I don't even recommend, but it's your choice. They think there's such a thing as like a hot hand where like you basically are playing and winning and you keep winning and winning and winning. And people make bets on that. And they think that because you're winning and you have been winning, you're going to keep winning. And that's not the way that things work. The probability's the same every time, right? It doesn't change just because you've been winning. And in this case, the probability of a pullback didn't change just because it kept going up. It actually increased the probability of a pullback because of the way that the stock was exhausting volume on the way up. You can see the volume was coming down and how there was that divergence finally on higher time frames. It does look like we're getting that push back above the 9s today. So we pushed over 950. We'll see what happens here. I'm curious to see if it goes ahead and pushes all the way up high or if it breaks down again. Not really sure. It's kind of resting on that creek or that cross right there. We'll see. Again, I'm not really like married to any idea that it has to be lower here or there or whatever. I do think that you need to see a pretty succinct push back up and then it needs to come back down and find support. Once we get that, then we can kind of analyze the way it's moving and you will see that M cross in the end. So right now it's pushing pretty hard. I think we could see that early M cross. So this could be that big push up. I've got it drawn a little bit to the right here just because, I'm trying to be conservative about it. But yeah, I think if we get that push right now, we'll see what happens. But I'm pretty excited to say that, yeah, I think that could be really good for us. We could see it come back down midweek and then push out again. So why does it have to come back down? Why can't it just take off and go? It's not that it can't do that. There's always a possibility that could happen. If it finds support quickly enough and there's not really any need to sell anymore, then yeah, I think you could just get that buy-in. But no matter what happens, once this makes a high, you have to then think about, well, did it ever come back and check this creek, right? And if not, there's always a chance it could. But specifically, it'd have to at least find support here, right, before a breakout. So I'm looking at this particular trend right now. This is 50 degrees on my chart, so I'm drawing 50 degrees from the top. I think once we get over this guy right here, we're likely going to see a bigger breakout. But for now, I still think it's going to be mostly sideways this week, okay? For SPY, this is kind of weird. I talked about this, I think, on stream a bit. We talked about it a little bit in our Discord group, but I drew this marker pretty early, and the only thing that didn't happen is we didn't push resistance here. It actually only came right up to that downward resistance here that you can see that we did come back and check Friday, and then going into Monday we had a gap up. So it's been pretty good for the breakout. It's looking right. Right now, I think this pullback was needed. There's a gap down here. I do think that, it could change the dynamic here if we don't hold this we don't hold this trend support coming down. If it ends up losing on that, We'll see. We might get a bounce and then another drop here to go back down and get the gap fill and then come up. There's just so many different ways it could happen. You could have it slide first and then come back above. I'm going to keep this one on the chart. If it finds support on this this week and then continues back to the upside, I'm going to be looking for that SOS. The price target here is the breakout of sort of an even atom bottom. It's basically the double of this move right here. So you'd look at that and you'd say, yeah, I think it could come all the way up to 443, which makes sense because that's the level that it dropped off way back on September 20th, about a month ago. And that would be like the full kind of recovery there. Obviously, long-wise, you're better off buying down here at 420. But if you're just playing a swing, if it can find support here, and then if it jumps over like whatever the next creek is, it could be a really good buying opportunity with, stop losses in place because you never know. That once it jumps over this guy right here, then you could have a good buying opportunity, possibly from, who knows, 430s, lower 430s to 443. Okay, that's a good trade. On the other hand, if it loses the support on this creek, especially if it comes down beneath both this upward trend and this downward resistance that turned into support back on Friday, that's like dropping beneath 430. If it drops beneath 430, you could be in for a pretty nasty slide. There's not really much else to support us all the way back down to some pretty low lows down in the 420s. So, from that point, I mean, maybe 424, but from that point, I would be much more bearish if it broke down here. So right now, I'm just kind of waiting. If it forms a bottom, could be a good buy opportunity. And see that continuation back to the upside. Right now, it looks pretty good. It looks like it's broken out above the top. It's consolidating. Just needs to find that upward movement, and we should be good to go. So for AMC, again, I'm not really expecting this to just like run and take off. It's not that it's impossible. It's just not usually how it goes. So looking for whatever high we get today. Again, maybe we do get up to that 980 mark. And then we'll see what happens. I do expect it to kind of come back down. And then ultimately, if we look at something like the 1 hour or the 2 hour, we're not nearly oversold yet. Like there's plenty of space here to have like kind of a corrective move to the upside and then still come back down. We're about 50% on the 2 hour. That's not a bad place to start a run from, considering like the last time we were there. You can see back here, we were down much lower. So considering all things considered, right, if we did start a run from wherever we're sitting today, that would be still pretty good because we've reset the RSI back down to the halfway point on the 2 hour. You could see that could still produce a pretty sizable run from where we are. But again, what's the whole point of this? Is it just to come back and touch this so we can move on? I don't think so. I think we gotta form a little bit more of a range here, a little bit more time down here to buy, and then we can go back up. I'll give you an update on it if it changes this week. But for now, that's all I got for you. I hope you guys have a good one, and I will talk to you later.